There are 3 paths. This is one of them. Far beneath the surface of the earth, hidden from the sun and the moon, upon the shores of the Starless Sea, there is a labyrinthine collection of tunnels and rooms filled with stories. Stories written in books and sealed in jars and painted on walls. Odes inscribed into skin and pressed into rose petals. Tales laid in tiles upon the floor, bits of plot worn away by passing feet, legends carved in crystal and hung from chandeliers, stories catalogued and cared for and revered, old stories preserved while new stories spring up around them. The place is sprawling, yet intimate. It is difficult to measure its breadth. Halls fold into rooms or galleries, and stairs twist downward or upward toward alcoves and arcades. Everywhere there are doors leading to new spaces and new stories and new secrets to be discovered, and everywhere there are books. It is a sanctuary for storytellers and story keepers and story lovers. They eat and sleep and dream surrounded by chronicles and histories and myths. Some stay for hours or days before returning to the world above, but others remain for weeks or years, living in shared or private chambers and spending their hours reading or studying or writing, discussing and creating with their fellow residents, or working in solitude. Of those who remain, a few choose to devote themselves to this space, to this temple of stories. There are 3 paths. This is one of them. This is the path of the acolytes. Those who wish to choose this path must spend a full cycle of the moon in isolated contemplation before they commit. The contemplation is thought to be silent, but of those who allow themselves to be locked away in the stone-walled room, some will realize that no one can hear them. They can talk, or yell, or scream, and it violates no rule. The contemplation is only thought to be silent by those who have never been inside the room. Once the contemplation has ended, they have the opportunity to leave their path, to choose another path or no path at all. Those who spend their time in silence often choose to leave both the path and the space. They return to the surface. They squint at the sun. Sometimes they remember a world below that they once intended to devote themselves to, but the memory is hazy, like a place from a dream. More often, it is those who scream and cry and wail, those who talk to themselves for hours, who are ready when the time comes to proceed with their initiation. Tonight, as the moon is new and the door is unlocked, it reveals a young woman who has spent most of her time singing She is shy and not in the habit of singing. But on her first night of contemplation, she realized almost by accident that no one could hear her. She laughed, partly at herself and partly at the oddity of having voluntarily jailed herself in the most luxurious of cells, with its feather bed and silken sheets. The laugh echoed around the stone room like ripples of water. She clasped her hand over her mouth and waited for someone to come, but no one did. She tried to recall if anyone had told her explicitly not to speak. She said, "Hello?" And only the echoes returned her greeting. It took a few days before she was brave enough to sing. She had never liked her singing voice, but in her captivity, free of embarrassment and expectation, she sang, softly at first, but then brightly and boldly. The voice that echoed, returned to her ears, was surprisingly pleasant. She sang all the songs she knew. She made up her own. In moments when she could not think of words to sing, she created nonsense languages for lyrics with sounds she found pleasing. It surprised her how quickly the time passed. Now, the door opens. The acolyte who enters holds a ring of brass keys. He offers his other palm to her. On it sits a small disc of metal with a raised carving of a bee. Accepting the bee is the next step in becoming an acolyte. This is her final chance to refuse. She takes the bee from the acolyte's palm. He bows and gestures for her to follow him. Young woman who is to be an acolyte returns the worn metal disc over in her fingers as they walk through narrow candlelit tunnels, lined with bookshelves and open caverns filled with mismatched chairs and tables, stacked high with books and dotted with statues. She pets a statue of a fox as they pass by, a popular habit that has worn its carved fur smooth between its ears. An older man, leafing through a volume, glances up as they pass, and recognizing the procession, he places 2 fingers to his lips and inclines his head at her. At her, not at the acolyte she follows. A gesture of respect for a position she does not yet officially hold. She bows her head to hide her smile. They continue down gilded stairways and through curving tunnels she has never traversed before. She slows to look at the paintings hung between the shelves of books, images of trees and girls and ghosts. The acolyte stops at a door marked with a golden bee. He chooses a key from his ring and unlocks it. Here begins the initiation. It is a secret ceremony. The details are known only to those who undergo it and those who perform it. It has been performed in the same fashion always, as long as anyone can remember. As the door with the golden bee is opened and the threshold crossed, the acolyte gives up her name. Whatever name this young woman was called before, she will never be addressed by it again. It stays in her past. Someday she may have a new name, but for the moment, she is nameless. The room is small and round and high-ceilinged, a miniature version of her contemplation cell. It holds a plain wooden chair on one side and a waist-high pillar of stone topped with a bowl of fire. The fire provides the only light. The elder acolyte gestures for the woman to sit in the wooden chair. She does. She faces the fire, watching the flames dance until a piece of black silk is tied over her eyes. The ceremony continues unseen. The metal bee is taken from her hand. There is a pause, followed by the sound of metal instruments clinking, and then the sensation of a finger on her chest, pressing into a spot on her breastbone. The pressure releases, and then it is replaced by a sharp, searing pain. She will realize afterward that the metal bee has been heated in the fire, its winged impression burned into her chest. The surprise of it unnerves her. She has prepared herself for what she knows of the rest of the ceremony, but this is unexpected. She realizes she has never seen the bare chest of another acolyte. When moments before she is ready, now she is shaken and unsure. But she does not say stop. She does not say no. She has made her decision, though she could not have known everything that decision would entail. In the darkness, fingers part her lips, and a drop of honey is placed on her tongue. That is to ensure that the last taste is sweet. In truth, the last taste that remains in an acolyte's mouth is more than honey. Its sweetness is swept away in blood and metal and burning flesh. Were an acolyte able to describe it afterward, they might clarify that the last taste they experience is one of honey and smoke. It is not entirely sweet. They recall it each time they extinguish the flame atop a beeswax candle, a reminder of their devotion. But they cannot speak of it. They surrender their tongues willingly. They offer up their ability to speak to better serve the voices of others. They take an unspoken vow to no longer tell their own stories. In reverence to the ones that came before and to the ones that shall follow. In this honey-tinged pain, the young woman in the chair thinks she might scream, but she does not. In the darkness, the fire seems to consume the entire room, and she can see shapes in the flames, even though her eyes are covered. The bee on her chest flutters. Once her tongue has been taken and burned and turned to ash, once the ceremony is complete and her servitude as an acolyte officially begins, once her voice has been muted, then her ears awaken. Then the stories begin to come.